Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Security Repo Podcast. Today, we are joined by Brendan Hohenadel. Now, Brendan has quite an interesting past and an interesting story to tell us. Brendan got his beginnings in desktop support, like many people, before moving into security, at first on the defensive side, before catching the red team bug and moving to offensive security. His current focus is on malware development and payload delivery, which is very interesting, as well as scoring enterprise networks for vulnerabilities, misconfigurations, and loot. Brendan has a bachelor's degree in computer science, the CISSP, OSCP, and OSCE certifications. I almost got them all correct. Next time. He is also a well-traveled presenter, speaking at DevCon 416, B-Sides, AltSecCon, and has participated in C3X. Brendan, welcome to the show. It's so good to have you here.
Thank you very much for having me. This is my first podcast, so this is exciting.
Well, we're thrilled you picked us for the first one.
I'm very glad to have you on the show. I met you back up at AltSecCon in Halifax earlier this year, where you gave an awesome talk on pen testing tools. You made it clear this is not a tutorial on how to do everything, just you laid out the tools you use. But I'm curious to how you got there. How did you go from desktop support to pen testing? What's that story?
So I'll be honest, I love telling this story because I think it's one of those, at least in my mind, kind of an inspirational story of, your dreams can come true. So it started off with me being into computers, like most people were in their teens in the 90s, and eventually the original Xbox came out, and I remember at one point my friend calling me and saying, "Hey man, I was looking online and I found out there's these chips that you can get, and you can solder them into the Xbox, and then we can pirate games for free." And I said, "That sounds really cool. How does the chip work?" And he said, "I don't care. I just want free games." And I said, "Cool. I want to know how it works." And then I started digging into that a bit more and got into the whole console hacking scene, started writing my own, BIOSes for the Xbox and stuff like that. And then decided I wanted to get into computer security for a career. And so I went back to university, and originally my intention was to work on the defensive side. I'd learn how to hack, and that'd make me a better defender. While I was in university, this TV show came out for, I want to say, Court TV. It was a little 3-part series called Tiger Team. And it followed around a red team doing red team engagements. And so one episode was them breaking into a jeweler's place, and one episode was them breaking into a luxury car dealership. And they were doing, Wi-Fi spoofing and walking in with USB sticks with malware on them and having the person at the front desk running the executable, stuff like that. And then, climbing through vents at the end to steal a luxury car, things like that. And I saw this and I thought, holy hell, this is a real job. I want to do this for a living. I can't believe people can actually do this. So I just focused all my attention and efforts towards learning basically the stuff they were doing in the show. While I was at the university, I got a job doing IT support. And I'd say once a week, I'd just say, all right, it's Friday afternoon. I'm going to take a look at the network and try and find some vulnerabilities and stuff. And I'd find some. And so I'd report them to the SOC. And eventually the SOC said, look, you've been doing so much for us. How about you just come and work for us? So I started working in the SOC, started doing internal pen testing at the university, which was eye-opening and terrifying. When I was first doing it, every single laptop, printer, everything had a public IP address. So that was kind of horrific. But eventually, I started hanging out in the hacker scene in Toronto, met some people, got a job at TD doing web app testing. And then again, while I was doing web apps, I was poking around at the systems that I probably shouldn't be in my laptop. And eventually they said, well, your skills are more aligned with our red team, so why don't we put you on the red team, which they were just forming at the time. And when they were forming the red team, they brought in a consultant to help them figure out logistics on how it would work. And that consultant was Chris Nickerson. And so Chris Nickerson was one of the guys from the Tiger Team show. So as soon as I found out he was coming, I said, "Oh my God, you've got to let me sit in on these planning meetings because I need to meet this guy. This guy was an inspiration for me." So I managed to sit in with some of the planning, and I helped. I gave some input, and Chris seemed to like it. And as the years went on, I started releasing some tools on GitHub.
That's such a cool story. I really,
So,
I really enjoy that. I'm fighting back the urge to ask you questions about console hacking, but so we're going to stick to the script.
no problem.
But one of the things I was always so interested in red teaming is I kind of put it to people, like writers that start there with a blank sheet of paper. When you go into a red team and your goal is to basically infiltrate an organization, what are kind of like the first steps that you tend to take to be able to do that? Is it like the blank white paper staring at you going, "Oh my God, what am I going to do?" Or do you have kind of well trodden paths that you can follow?
So the answer is yes.
Right, moving on.
It's very much dependent engagement to engagement. Part of it is what are the rules of engagement that the customer has laid out? Are they going to allow us to do things like physical? Are we allowed to show up at offices and try and lie or sneak our way in and plug something into the network? If not, are they okay with us phishing? If they're okay with us phishing, are we allowed to also call people? Are there certain topics that are allowed or not allowed for phishing? A good example would be we did this one engagement a while ago where we managed to find users' credentials in a breach dump, and they were still valid credentials, and so we were able to get into that person's email. And once we were in their email, we sent the head of HR an email from that user with a link in it. And the email just said, "I was told that I should send you these examples of harassment that I've been experiencing in the workplace." And so when they clicked on the link, it spoofed their landing page. We recorded their credentials. And then we were able, and actually, I think the person who is in charge of HR actually forwarded it to 2 or 3 other people in HR as well. So we ended up getting a couple other credentials. Some places are not obviously cool with that kind of thing. Some places are. But back to the original question, I guess it's really dependent on what the client is going to allow us to do. We do have certain, I guess, things that we are general standbys. Phishing, vishing are huge for us. We also have a number of methods of getting breach data from botnet dumps and stuff like that. Some of them are up to date almost to a day or two. So frequently we're able to get real credentials from those that we can try and leverage to get in. We also have a very skilled team when it comes to web applications. So we'll point them at certain web apps and see if we can find like RCE on locally hosted stuff. It's surprising how much RCE is still out there and not discovered. It's also kind of scary how many times we've found RCE and then found out we're not the only people in the box. So.
Well, okay, that is terrifying. Well, one of the things that you kind of mentioned in there that I want to follow up on is, you talked about like what you're allowed to do in a pen test, and part of me kind of understands it, but part of me doesn't, because like, what's the reason that a company would want to provide? Wouldn't a company just want to know their vulnerabilities? I mean, access is access. Does it really matter like how that's potential vulnerability? So what? Why is that? Why do some companies want to kind of tie one hand behind your back, so to speak?
Couple different reasons, I think. I'll be honest, we've had clients who have flat out said, "Look, the only reason we're doing this pen test is for a check mark. So we don't really care about findings. We don't really care about how good of a job you do. We need to prove that we've done a pen test. We tend to get really aggressive with those clients and really try hard when they say that, just to prove that, maybe we're just a check mark to them, but we're going to show them just how bad things could get. And hopefully they take it a little seriously instead of just treating us like a checkbox on a form they have to fill out. Other times we've had customers who are kind of new to pen testing, and so they're really nervous about us knocking over systems. We have some clients who say you're only allowed to test in the dead of night. So we'll have to have guys who basically work a night shift because the client's worried that when we're doing our web scans, we're going to DDoS them, even though we've never knocked anything over, knock on wood. So there's a couple different reasons. And also, some other places we have tested repeatedly, and the first year we give them, a 70-page report that has like 30 findings in it, and the blue team is only like 2 people, and they just kind of say, "Oh my God, how are we supposed to triage all this?" So then sometimes they'll just limit scope and just say, "Okay, we're only going to have you test these little segments because this is all we can handle."
That's we've heard that from other pen testers we've talked to out there. That it's overwhelming because there's so many things in so many ways in. Do you find that when you go back after the first year you made that 70-page report, that is pretty much the exact same 70-page report you do next year?
We have some clients that are like that, and it's really frustrating, especially when you find simple things like when you curb roast an SPN that's a DA and its password is like Veeam123 exclamation mark, and then you do them 3 years in a row, and that SPN always has the same password. And then the client starts complaining, saying, "Hey, we keep getting the same findings. Why aren't you guys finding anything?" It's like, because you guys aren't fixing anything. And the reality is, just because we pointed it out once doesn't mean that an attacker is not going to abuse it as well. We're going to keep pointing it out until you fix it, because attackers are still going to abuse it.
So I want to kind of shift a little bit to ask about the speed of these engagements. So you're engaging with them. You're going to do a series of tests over a series of a certain amount of time. I'm understanding right, but like how fast are you getting in? Like how like you set up the engagement, but like what's your typical time to breach, time to pwn?
It really varies depending on client. And it's kind of shocking. Some places, I just recently did a college, and they are one of the most secure places I've ever encountered. And they have a team of like 4 people, and they have things so locked down. It's just so impressive. But then on the flip side, I've done international banks, and within the first afternoon, I'm domain admin in 10 of their domains because they couldn't see, because they had, again, SPNs with passwords that were like Veeam123 exclamation mark, and had absolutely no visibility to anything that was happening. My fastest one was me and my coworker, Andy Gill. We're doing an internal pen test for a hospital, specifically testing their HVAC system. And we found a domain controller. And I think from first time connecting to our computer to domain admin was 8 minutes. And that was because their enterprise admin account didn't have a password.
Hang on. Wait, what?
Yeah.
I swear I misheard you on that last one.
No, so we zero to enterprise admin in 8 minutes because the EA account didn't have a password.
Oh, okay.
So
Well,
yeah.
you've brought up passwords there, and like one of the things when you look at breaches, that secrets, API keys, credential peers, and any kind of digital credentials, they always seem to play some role, whether it be initial access, whether it be to gain lateral movement or move. From your experience, like how big of a role, kind of as discovering of these, these secrets? Is that something that you typically see in pen tests, or do you tend to focus on kind of other areas of access?
Well, it depends if it's internal or external. So from external, it's a little harder for credentials to gain valid credentials. Like I said, sometimes we're able to get botnet dumps with valid credentials, and that helps a lot. And if not valid credentials, usually you sometimes find someone who's been infected multiple times in multiple botnet dumps, and their passwords are spring 2020 exclamation mark, summer 2022 exclamation mark. And you're like, all right, well, it's currently spring 2024. I bet I can guess what this guy's password is. Um, but we also find stuff in GitHub frequently still. People are still somehow posting stuff in GitHub and it's not getting found, which always blows my mind. But internally, that's where clear text credentials they're just laying all over the place. It's like someone just took a handful of rice and just threw it over the room, except it's credentials. There's for those who aren't familiar, there's this wonderful tool called Snaffler, and basically as long as you have domain user creds, it will just scrape the entire Active Directory, every machine on the domain, looking for shares, and then looks for clear text creds. And I don't think I have ever had an engagement where we haven't found at least one passwords.txt or passwords.doc full of credentials. Sometimes we find, one or two like DA accounts. We had one that was a financial institute, and we found a spreadsheet with over 500 credentials in it, all of them valid. And this was allowing us to log into like the Federal Reserve as this financial institute, a whole bunch of different government things, logging into their portal for credit cards, just everything. So yeah, clear text creds are all over the place. Bitbucket, places that host Bitbucket internally as well. That's just the gift that keeps on giving, because people assume because the source code is being stored internally, it's okay to store clear text creds in them. But it turns out all you have to do is search for password or PWD, and you've got just tons of creds to databases and web servers and everything else that this source code connects to.
My favorite is the history. The history it always keeps giving. You can see how it happens. Like a developer working on a remote branch just hard codes it just to see if it works. Right? They're not an idiot. They're gonna remove it. Right?
Yeah.
But for people like you and attackers, they know. It's really interesting. There's some great analogies that I'm definitely going to shamelessly steal from you. The rice one, I think it's top of mind.
One of the really interesting ones that I discovered recently was once you've got some clear text credentials for a different user, using PowerShell to run process and then run Edge as that user. If they have Active Directory sync with Azure, Edge will run automatically logged into their O365, and if they have any passwords saved in Edge, all those passwords will be available. That helped us get into a CyberArk of a large financial institute a while
ago. Yeah, financial institutions, Federal Reserve, those have to be some really interesting get out of jail free cards that those lawyers are drafting for you.
Yeah, there's been a few times where we've had the client's lawyer get on a call with us and just say, look, we need to step back and talk about this between ourselves. Don't talk to your team about what you have done. Don't talk to anybody about what you've done. Don't touch your computer until we've reached out to you, because we're not sure how to handle what you've just gotten access to.
And one of those central things that I hear many pen testers and many red teamers talk about as the thing that they were striving to get access to, because literally it was the keys to all the kingdoms, is Active Directory. You mentioned it earlier. Kerber Roasting mentioned it a while ago in conversation. So how dangerous is having Active Directory? Is like the solution just get rid of it? Like, what do we do about the fact that this is prime target for everybody that's going after systems?
I mean, the tricky thing with Active Directory is it's kind of a double-edged sword. One of the great things about it is it really gives you granular configuration for policies for like security and for access and stuff like that. So used correctly, Active Directory is absolutely fantastic and can really harden and secure your environment really well. The problem comes with one, misconfiguration, which is just it's easy to do. And two, especially in environments that have been using the same Active Directory for a long time and just kind of upgrade their servers, there's legacy protocols that for some reason Windows kind of fails open and just lets you carry those settings over. One of our favorites is there's a Active Directory setting, or not setting, what's the word I'm looking for? Just not description. Shoot. Attribute, that's it. Sorry, an Active Directory attribute for users called user password. And sometimes that has a clear text password in it. There's another one called Unix password. And if they used to use Active Directory to synchronize logging into Linux back in the day, the clear text credentials would be a Unix password. And if that's an environment that's been using the same Active Directory setup and just carrying it over, there's a good chance that's going to be populated. Yeah, I mean, Active Directory is wonderful if you can do it properly, but it's so easy to not do properly. And that's one of the things that I always encourage our clients is these malicious tools that we're using, they should be running them themselves because it'll help them find all the bad stuff that we're finding, and hopefully they can find it before the malicious person does.
I know that was a big part of your talk back in Halifax was, hey, here are the tools, not a detailed description on how to use them, but like know what we're using so you can go hack yourself. I really like that mindset. We've talked to multiple other testers, multiple security folks around APIs. It's like, if you're not attacking yourself, then you're not really aware of how you're going to be attacked.
Absolutely. I mean, it gives you good baseline for what an attack looks like, right? Why wait until you can afford a pen test or a purple team engagement? Just run a password spray with one of the tools that attackers use, and then say, all right, let's look at the logs. Oh my God, this is lighting up. How come we're not alerting on this? Let's fix this.
It's it's really interesting. There's a lot to unpack already in this. One of the questions that I have is, you're dealing with a lot of different businesses, a lot of clients. What what would be some advice beyond don't misconfigure Active Directory that you would kind of want them to hear? What would be the kind of the advice that you would give to businesses or future clients or just people that are interested in security?
So I think for potential clients or current clients, one of the things that I always stress is, like I mentioned earlier, is use the tools that we're using. One of the biggest things that I always stress to people is run Bloodhound in your environment. It's free, it's pretty easy to use, it's pretty easy to understand, and there's loads of documentation about how to figure out all the different abuse paths that it talks about. And it also talks about remediation. If you can run that in your environment once a year, there's a good chance that your Active Directory is going to be a lot more secure than places that don't. That college that I mentioned earlier, they run it all the time on their own. And because of that, their Active Directory is very secure. Similarly, Active Directory certificate services, that's the current hotness for privilege escalation. Run certify. It'll very quickly spit out your vulnerable certificate templates, and it's really a click fix. It's super simple. Beyond that, run baselines with all the other tools that we use. Yeah, I think my presentation is actually available on the AltSecCon schedule. go grab all the tools that I listed and just run them and get baselines for your SIM and your logging and your alerts. Beyond that, for people who want to like learn security, tools like Bloodhound, there is ways to populate a Bloodhound database so you can figure out how to use it on your own. Again, in my presentation, I believe I have a link on how to spin up your own Active Directory, and that's something really important. If you want to learn how to hack Active Directory, the best thing you can do is create your own. And it doesn't take a really beefy system to run a single domain controller and 2 or 3 workstations connected to it.
You mentioned a few tools in there. Is there like a resource people should be looking to, like, hey, here are pen testing tools? I know you gave that talk. That was an awesome list of tools, but is there like a reference, a website, something, or we just go look at your GitHub? Where should we be finding?
Yeah, unfortunately, there's a lot of really good blogs out there that kind of work through a lot of these tools. I don't think there's any one real central location. Well, no, there certainly are GitHubs and blogs that have everything well organized. Off the top of my head, I don't have any URLs or links that I could suggest aside from the Lars Labs blog is it pretty good. We do a really good job. And I'm sorry for tooting our own horn here, but um, we do a really good job about breaking down technologies and vulnerabilities, and then also linking tools that can exploit them, as well as how to fix them. So it's not completely exhaustive, but as a lot of the tools that I talk about are certainly highlighted there. Beyond that, I hate mentioning a rival consulting firm, but SpectreOps is really good at blogging about tools, and they release a lot of the tools that we use have been released by SpectreOps. So if you check out their GitHub, GhostPack on GitHub, that's where the majority of the Active Directory offensive tooling is. So that's a really good starting place. Learn how to use all the GhostPack tools, and yeah, you'll be able to own a lot of places.
And just for the listeners, there's going to be links in the show notes to the AltSecCon talk that Brendan has been talking about, and also to the Lars blog and some of the other resources. So if you're badly Googling, you can stop and you can just look in the show notes and you will find the links there. Moving along now, but I'm always fascinated when I get to talk to red teamers and people out there doing offensive security. I was wondering, do you have any, stories that maybe you could share? We can remove the names of of those talking of any stories that spring to mind about gaining access or maybe getting caught or what happens in that side. Is there any stories that you could share before we kind of start to wrap up the episode?
Yeah, so this is one of my more favorite stories from a recent engagement I did, and I told this to the AltSecCon crowd, but for those who weren't there, they'll hopefully get a kick out of this. So a coworker and I were doing a physical assessment of a bank in the U.S., and we were tasked with breaking into their headquarters as well as a branch. Now, being Canadian, obviously, I was a little anxious about trying to break into a bank in a US state because that's a great way to get shot. But luckily, my coworker who went with me was very talented. This was actually their first time doing a physical. I was training them on how to do it, and they absolutely knocked it out of the park. So what we did was, before we traveled, we spent a few days doing open source intelligence gathering and checking out the bank's social accounts, LinkedIn and Twitter and all that stuff, and Instagram. And one of the things we noticed was that all the employees and all the pictures were wearing branded lanyards. And at the end of the branded lanyard was a key fob that they would presumably be using to buzz into various doors. And we could tell that the key fob was an older model that we could probably clone with like a Proxmark or a Flipper Zero or something like that. So we brought some blank key fobs with us, as well as cloning devices, and thought to ourselves, if we could get one of those lanyards, that would probably be just as good as having a pass to get into any of the locations. So we landed Sunday. did a little bit of driving around to some of the locations that we're thinking about breaking into. Just do a bit of recon in a very subtle convertible white Mustang, and we we noticed at one of the headquarters that there was a guard desk right at the front door, but at the back door there was elevators that were out of view of the guard desk. So we figured, okay, that's our way in for the headquarters. So Monday morning, we drove to one of the branches, and my coworker went into the branch under the guise of wanting to set up an appointment to get a loan. And after they were done setting up the appointment, as they were leaving, they stopped, turned around, and said, "Oh, this is a bit of a weird question. I have a younger sibling. They're disabled somehow. I can't remember how he said. And they collect lanyards. I know it's really strange, but they absolutely love collecting lanyards. It would really make their day if I could come home with one of your lanyards." And of course, the bank teller just said, "Oh, absolutely. Here, take mine." So now we had this blank lanyard. So Tuesday, which is it's awful, but at the same time, it worked. So we then went to Starbucks, grabbed some empty cups. Tuesday morning rolled around. My coworker filled the cups half up with water, just enough so that they had some weight to them. They looked like they were full of coffee, but not full enough to worry about spilling them. We sat in the parking lot at 7:30 in the morning of the headquarters, again, in our convertible white Mustang, completely subtle, and just waited for an employee to show up at work. And as soon as they did, my coworker just hopped out of the car, Starbucks in each hand, headphones in their ears, and just followed them in. And when we got to the door, showed the Starbucks, pointed at the headphones, and just said, "I'm in a meeting." And the person opened the door for them, let them in, buzzed them onto the elevator. My coworker went up to the third floor, unplugged the printer, hopped on the network for a little bit, went over to somebody and just said, "I'm having a little bit of trouble getting network connection." And right away they said, "Oh, you know what? Lindsay's on vacation. Why don't you just come sit at Lindsay's desk?" Then they got to sit down for 45 minutes at Lindsay's desk with full network connection. That afternoon, I went to the branch where my coworker had gotten the lanyard, wearing the lanyard, of course, and the key fob underneath with the laptop under my arm. And I walked in and I just said, "Hey, I'm Brendan. I'm from IT. We've been trying to push an update to your printer, but for some reason we can't do it over the network. So they sent me to manually do it. Do you mind if I just, run to the back room and do it real quick?" And the one teller I spoke to, she just said, "Okay, hold on. What's your name?" And I said, "It's Brendan." I could see her scrolling on her screen. It's touchscreen, and she says, "What's your last name, Brendan?" And not thinking, I just said, "Hohenadel." And she's scrolling through, and she said, "Look, I'm not seeing you in the employee directory." And I said, "Oh, you know what? It's my second day, so they probably just haven't updated the directory yet." So the teller looks at me and she goes, "Okay, just a second. I'm just going to phone the IT desk." And so she picks up the phone number, or the phone, and I can hear her talking while I'm trying to make casual chit chat with her coworkers. And I can hear her say, "Yeah, there's a guy here to fix the printer. It's his second day. His name's Brendan." And the whole time I'm just thinking, "Oh God, I'm busted. I'm busted. There's no way I'm getting out of this." She hangs up the phone, turns to me and goes, "All right, Brendan, come with me." And I can't believe that I didn't give it away with my jaw just dropping to the floor when she was just like, "Yeah, you're cool." Took me into the back room where the all-in-one printer was. I unplugged it, hopped on the network, did my thing. About, I want to say, 5 feet away from me was their safe, which was unlocked and open, as well as their server rack, which was unlocked and open. And they left me in the back room for 45 minutes, completely alone, aside from one time she came in to bring me a chair and a water, because when she came in to bring me the water, I was sitting on the floor. So that probably one of my favorite stories.
That story just kept giving. Like at every point, I was like, "Okay, this is gonna be the," and then so yeah, it's amazing. I absolutely love hearing these stories. So that's a great one.
And you included some details that you definitely left out of the AltSecCon version. I think just for sake of time there. I'm in a meeting and just following someone in the elevator. How often do we do that? Like someone is like, well, hold on, wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Crazy.
kudos to my coworker, Alden. It was their first time ever doing this. And I just said, all right, Tuesday morning, you're doing headquarters. And they just kind of said, all right, let's do this. And they just ran with it. It was awesome.
I get anxiety like hearing these stories. Like I'm not a physical guy. I mean, without ever having to test the theory, I would like to think that I'm good at it, but I never want to have to test because my anxiety is just too high hearing these stories. But it must be that first time you do it, it must be terrifying, and
The
I don't know how you
very
don't give it away.
the very first time I did it was for a very large bank, and we attacked their headquarters in a large metropolitan city, and this was a 30 floor headquarters. Like it was huge. And I had we were doing bash bunnies, so we snuck onto a floor, and you plug the bash bunny in. It looks like a keyboard and types out a command and downloads malware, and then we get access. So I'd found an unlocked computer, and I tried it a couple times, but it just wasn't firing properly. And so I gave up and walked away. And I had this one woman like run down the hallway after me. And she ended up berating me in the hallway for plugging some mystery device. And I managed to flip it so that she ended up apologizing to me by the end of it. Um, but once that was over, I went to the bathroom and dry heaved like 3 times just from the adrenaline dump. And then I just messaged my manager and I just said, I'm done for the day. I can't do this anymore.
Wow. Well, there are some fantastic stories. I could sit here and listen to you all day, but unfortunately, we do have to wrap it up. But just before we go, we usually play a game called Best and Worst, which is asking people for the best security advice and the worst security advice. I think you've already given us a lot of good security advice. The part that stands out is use the tools that hackers are using. But I did want to ask you, what is the worst security advice that you hear people say, or perhaps someone has given to you? What's something that's just terrible that's out there that needs to be corrected?
Honestly, I think one of the bad pieces of security advice that is popular is complex passwords. There's no reason that a password has to be 20 characters of random gibberish, because users aren't going to remind or remember those, and that's how you get password.txt files laying all over the place. I think much better is using passphrases. What is it, horse battery stapler example from XKCD. Reality is that is a solid password. It's easy to remember. Nobody's going to guess it. It is much better than, basically doing smashing the keyboard with your hands for 30 seconds.
Yeah, there you go. I tend to agree. Although I do think that people from one password, another password manager is going to be chasing you down now.
I will. I will say with the caveat that if you're using a proper password manager, then it's okay to have crazy random ones. But if not, passphrases are, I think, the way to go.
Well, and it is actually good advice, because I have tried for years to get my parents onto a password manager. It's not going to happen. I've given up. But password phrases, if we could get them to that point, then at least we're going to be getting somewhere. So that is some really good, really, really interesting insights there, Brendan. We have come to the end of the episode, unfortunately. But Brendan, final question: if people want to follow you, maybe check out, if you're at a conference in the area, what's the best kind of social handles for people to follow you, or maybe follow, the Lars information as well?
So I'm on LinkedIn under my name, Brendan Hohenadel. I am also on Twitter, B Hohenadel. Not very subtle or exciting, but it's easy to find me. My GitHub is Red Lectroid. If anybody's a Buckaroo Banzai fan, it's the bad guys from that movie. That's about the easiest way. If I'm going to be speaking at conferences, I'll be talking about it on Twitter or LinkedIn. And Lara's on Twitter will certainly be tweeting about it as well.
Any final words before we hit the big button there, Dwayne?
Just want to say thanks very much. I really appreciate the suggestion. Tiger Team, I've never heard of it, but now I'm definitely going to go track that down.
It's on YouTube. It is awesome.
Well, thanks so much, Brendan, and I really hope that we can have you back on the show at a future date. So all the best, and thanks everyone for listening.